I'm here to listen. Why am I walking on this way?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Muse's AT Podcast, where you can relive my epic journey with me. This is Muse, and what follows is my Appalachian Trail story. Today's episode covers Saturday, June 21st, 2025. This is the day we say goodbye to Wayfinder, catching a shuttle to the airport in Bangor. We don't really deal with the emotional impact of her departure in this episode. That's coming as it really hits me once back on trail. You'll hear it next week. Last time I spoke to you solo, I promised some post-trail updates about various friends, specifically those related to hiking. First, let me bring you up to speed on Ratatouille. When we talked to Ratatouille in just the second week of the podcast, he was finishing up a coast-to-coast trip, stopping along the way at a number of national parks. Since, he has now completed the Scottish National Trail, done some sightseeing and a little bit of hiking in Ireland, and also thru-hiked the Laugavegur Trail in Iceland before returning stateside. Fun little note on the Laugavegur Trail. In Icelandic, the name Laugavegur translates to Hot Spring Road or Hot Spring Route. That's a fun little segue to where we spent a lot of our time just last week visiting Shotgun in Hot Springs, North Carolina. Leaving my house in Concord on Monday, July 27th, Ratatouille was off to his next adventure, a road trip with some friends up to Isle Royale, his last national park in the lower 48, before heading off to yet other adventures he has planned. I had told you a while back that Foggy Froggy was on the long trail looking to thru-hike that route in Vermont before starting her job. When I caught up with the Slowbos the week before heading back to the AT, she had started her job and still had a little bit of the long trail to fill in because she got stolen away to Maine with Silly Putty, and the two of them enjoyed Acadia and also a bit of the rest of Maine. Silly Putty had also retraced a number of steps from last year in Maine, and it was cool to get pictures from her in the group chat in places like the Bigelows side by side with a picture from exactly a year before. As for whether or not Silly Putty and Margot Polo joined Foggy Froggy for a time on the long trail, I kind of filled that in a little bit before, but they did indeed, and it sounds like they had an awesome time. And Ratatouille on his travels may also see the girls. He's hoping to catch up with them in the Adirondacks if that works out after he finishes Isle Royale. And to also possibly spend a day with Utah in Wisconsin as well. And I've also been following along with Goldilocks, who last year was called Won't Get Up Will. Now this year she's hiking the Northeast 115, which I actually misspoke in an earlier episode. I've been kind of catching up on listening to my episodes. So I realized I misspoke and said she was doing a Sobo thru hike. She is working to tackle the Northeast 115, which takes in all of the 4,000 footers in the Northeast, specifically Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and New York. I caught up with her briefly last week, and she is all the way done with Maine and heading into the Whites. So go Goldilocks, you've got this. I've also been talking recently with Eddie Machete, who we met at Trail Days. He hiked a large portion of this trail last year with a lot of the 2025 thru hikers that I met on my hike. I never actually coincided with him last year, but we met at Trail Days. Anyway, he has started a Sobo thru hike this year with his girlfriend. When I caught up with him earlier in July, it looked like he was still in Maine. And then, of course, there's Shotgun, who Ratatouille and I visited just a little bit ago. When we left him in Hot Springs back on July 26th, he was going to catch a shuttle back to where we left off together, putting his next steps directly into the Smokies. When this episode airs, he'll probably be just about leaving the Smokies and soon to be joined for a couple days by Frogger and Pastor Frank, before he ultimately finishes up just as he started with his wife riding Shotgun. It was great to spend a few days supporting Shotgun as he finishes his trek towards Springer, and it's just awesome to be back on trail as well. And this Friday will feature some audio that I got while on trail, so I'm looking forward to putting that together for a different sort of episode than what we normally get. So this was kind of a longer intro, but lots of great stuff going on. Without any further ado, let's jump into today's haiku. And the one I've got for you today is from June 13th, 2026. To be enlightened, internalize hidden truth, have been all along. And today I don't have a picture to describe. Once again, there is no picture in this entry. And that's one thing that you're going to find was always a struggle with me, and I got better at it towards the end, but we'll even get into entries where I mention it right there in the entry, like, oh man, I wish I got a picture. Didn't think about it. To folks who have known me a little bit longer, especially my family, that is not a surprise at all. That is something that would have been part of this journey that I just missed the idea of taking pictures. But anyway, still struggling with that. No picture this time. On to the entry. June 21st, 2025. Bye, Haley. Start, Shaw's Hiker Hostel, Monson, Maine. End, Shaw's Hiker Hostel, Monson, Maine. Miles, 0. Today's agenda: ride to Bangor and see Haley off, then Summer Solstice party back at the hostel. The ride was good. Seemed to take forever to get there, and oddly not that long to get back. Haley got home just fine. As I write this, I definitely already miss her. On the way back, Chester, the shuttle driver, who thru-hiked back in 21, started dropping tons of knowledge, tricks and tips for things coming up on the trail. It was pretty awesome. Then a couple of hours later, I got some sort of food poisoning. I started getting sick around 3 p.m. and had a very unpleasant next 6 hours or so before I drifted off to sleep. Oddly, this would be by far my best sleep at the hostel. Not sure why, but I'd been unable to sleep there. It was certainly comfortable. So anyway, I missed that party. Seemed like a good time. I caught wind a little later that it was a 10th anniversary as well. I'm guessing that meant Poet and Hippie Chick bought Shaw's in 2015. They've done a great job with the place and are just all-round great people. Even though Haley still ended up deciding to go home, I'll still always appreciate the extra time Poet especially spent with her to support. So I went to sleep wondering if I'd have to stay another day due to illness. Fast forward to the morning of the 22nd. I felt great and headed back out onto the trail. All right, we're going to take a quick break to hear from the sponsors who help keep Muse's AT podcast on the trail. These are offerings that truly enhanced my thru-hike experience, so I'd really like you to check them out. Please look for and follow the links in the show notes to this episode. Looking forward to that lazy day on the couch, knocking down your Netflix queue and wondering what to wear? Quick answer: wear something else. Summit Ready Apparel is clothing built for those who scramble over jagged rocks, reach the peaks, and actually enjoy getting caught in a torrential downpour. If you're someone who doesn't mind the elements and has the grit to crush the next segment anyway, look no further than Summit Ready to match your restless trail spirit. Check out the catalog at summitreadyapparel.com and get ready for your next adventure. That's summitreadyapparel.com. Looking for your next great trail read? Walk Uphill is a powerful story about leaving the emptiness of modern corporate life behind and finding a completely new beginning on the Appalachian Trail. It's about discovering what life can look like when you embrace freedom, lighten your load, and take it step by relentless step. I actually read this book myself during a couple rest days in Gorham, New Hampshire, right after conquering the brutal terrain of southern Maine. I literally couldn't put it down. I read it from cover to cover in 2 days. The book chronicles the real-life events of the author, Bounce the Hiker, in a twisty, shocking, edge-of-your-seat story that even the most imaginative fiction writer couldn't make up. Just a quick content warning, there is definitely adult material in this book, so I wouldn't recommend buying it for your 10-year-old's birthday. But if you're looking for a gripping, raw trail adventure, I highly recommend Walk Uphill by Bounce the Hiker. You can find it easily on Amazon by searching Walk Uphill Book, or just click the direct link in the show notes of this episode. All right, this episode I actually come in without any sort of extra agenda. Sometimes I have a topic that the entry sort of leads me into. I kind of don't have that. I really just wanted to come in and just describe this day. As I got started on figuring out how I wanted to do it, though, I realized that the entry itself gave me a unique challenge on that. It summarized the day quite well, so it kind of takes a little bit of the wind out of my sails there, but at the same time, there's a lot more that we can kind of go into a little bit, so I'm still going to stick with that agenda here. First, maybe coming into the day, like the entry mentions, our agenda is very simple. We are going to ride to Bangor, I'm going to come back, and then I was planning on hanging out and enjoying this Summer Solstice party. This party had some big anticipation around it. There was a lot of excitement around the hostel for it. And I remember there were some people who even modified their pace on trail just to get there for that party. And it sounded like a great time. As you heard in the entry, I didn't actually enjoy the party. I didn't attend the party, really. I was there at Shaw's. I was out in the bunkhouse now, and I was throwing up all night. Don't really know what happened because I'd been perfectly fine, even strong up until then, but I was just puking for about 6 hours, from about 3 to about 9. And the party was still going strong when I finally really drifted off to sleep at 9 o'clock and didn't get back up again. But yeah, the party for me was, quick dashes out to the bathhouse from the bunkhouse. I do remember running into Dan and Michaela a couple times, which were really the only people that I really knew at this point. And I would end up talking to them at some point later, and they would be like, yeah, you looked pretty green. You didn't look so good. Dan and Michaela being the only people that I really knew was kind of an interesting dynamic in and of itself. And that's worth updating who was really still there, who wasn't still there. Dan and Michaela, of course, were. They would end up zeroing that Sunday, the day after the day that we're talking about, and get back on trail Monday, which is what I might have done as well if I didn't feel well in the morning. I'm actually kind of wondering when I wrote this entry, because I'm obviously looking back even from the 22nd being in the past, so don't really know when I would have done the writing, possibly even at the Sterling Inn in Caratunk. Maybe I kind of caught up everything at that point. Worth mentioning there, though, that Dan and Michaela were the only Sobos I really knew, because a lot of the other folks from the wilderness, from that chapter of this adventure, they had already left, and they really kind of all left together on Wednesday. Wednesday was mine and Haley's first 0 day here at Monson, and that is when Daddy Longlegs, Chaps, and Caveman and Dunk all left together. I'm not sure if Won't Get Up Will might have also left that day. That is not how my memory is bringing that to me, but I don't know why that wouldn't have been the case. But either way, she was definitely gone by Saturday as well. And the other funny dynamic as far as Sobos went is that some names that you're going to hear very soon, because I'm going to kind of introduce them as my Caratunk crew, I barely knew. And you would have heard this even from Frogger when he was talking in the Trail Days episode. Like, I had seen him, I'd kind of said hi, I suppose, but I never really talked to him because we were busy. We were thinking about how to get to the airport and working all that stuff out and everything. In more or less that exact same category was Spicy and Ribbit, because I had seen them, was aware of them. Maybe I'd said hi to them. I don't even know if I said that, but I would end up meeting them later. And to almost round out the Caratunk crew, that's where Kiddo and Hero come in as well. Now, they had come in a little bit earlier. I think they were there the evening of the big washout on Thursday, because that was kind of the introduction. Hero was called Hero. Now, he didn't like Hero. He was a little too modest for the name, Hero being his trail name. So he, because he was a guitar player, liked to change that to Guitar Hero. So Guitar Hero became it, but a lot of people still called him Hero. Now, why was he called Hero? That goes back to the story that you heard way back Ratatouille tell, where that girl tried to cross the stream, should not have been trying to cross the stream, and got saved by this riverboat instructor. That riverboat instructor, his name was Mateo, and he was on trail with Kiddo, whose real name is Shayla, and she was going south for a thru hike, but he was just kind of visiting her for a little bit. He happened to be there during that dramatic event, and he was the perfect person to be there during that dramatic event. He saved her and got the trail name Hero. Fast forward a little bit to the party, when I'm hearing the party in the background, and that would be when I would hear some of his guitar playing. Now, I play the guitar myself, but comparatively, I shouldn't even be saying I play the guitar myself. Now, he's very, very good. Also, that would be the first time, and not the last time, not by a long shot, that I would hear Kiddo and her voice and guitar at the hiker party. In one of the next couple episodes, we will reintroduce the Caratunk crew again, but that was almost a little bit of a preview to that, just as it related to this party. Another thing, and I think this is fun, and it relates indirectly to the party, because the party was, as you heard in the interview with Poet and Hippie Chick, it was their 10th anniversary. And yes, 2015 was when they got the hostel to begin with. And following that conversation here on the podcast with Hippie Chick and Poet, I got a text from Utag, who had done his first attempt of the Appalachian Trail back in 2015. And his trail family was one of the first ones to stay at Shaw's Hiker Hostel when Hippie Chick and Poet first bought it. So I thought that was pretty cool. And this goes on to talk about poet and hippie chick hanging out with Utag and his family. And he's just saying that it was an awesome interview, but also that he just really loves those guys, which you heard Wayfinder say it. Everybody does, but there's really good reason. Last little tidbit before we take off and head to Bangor. You might have been wondering why I sent 2 packages away from Shaw's Hiker Hostel when I mentioned that an episode or 2 ago. I actually grabbed all of Haley's food, rearranged my food, and sent half of the food off to the hostel of Maine down in Carabasset Valley. And so Shaw's took care of that package for me as well. It got there, and I already had a resupply waiting for me when I got there, say 2 weeks later. Okay, now on to that shuttle ride, and that shuttle ride really was awesome. Chester basically talked the whole time, and I got a lot about his background. He always wanted to be working in hospitality. Of course, then he thru hiked back in 21, so he really wanted to run a hostel. I don't know where he is on the track to doing that, but he was there at Shaw's, one of the best hostels to do it, learning how a hostel runs. Hopefully he'll be able to buy one sometime in the near future, because I do think he'd be awesome at it. And as we were talking, he took everything section by section, state by state, and just broke it down for me. As I recall, a little more than a year later, the 2 things that stick in my mind of that conversation are going to be, 1, talking about Vermont, which can also be sometimes named Vermud. And he was talking about the fact that Vermont's conservation mindset has them such that they don't necessarily maintain the trails, but they just kind of let them be wild. I don't know if that's absolutely true or not. I never got any sort of confirmation of that, but he was saying that that was the main contributor to why Vermont goes all muddy. I think my own hike through Vermont, with 2 very obvious exceptions, was actually quite dry. So I didn't really experience the infamous Vermud anyway, but I was there in like 2 pretty significant downpours where I did see kind of runoff and stuff like that, but I don't know. I don't know if that really relates to what he was saying, but it's one of the things I remembered. The other thing, and this will, Ratatouille and Crooked Letter, if they're hearing this, they will either roll their eyes at it, laugh at it, I don't know what. But the other thing that Chester told me was every now and then, just give every bit of your gear a good scrub down. And what he was saying was, if you don't do that, if you don't clean your gear, what can happen is even the salt from your sweat can become attractive to rodents who will then chew up your straps on your backpack or any other very inconvenient things that can have chewed up by a mouse or rat. So every now and then you should just soap down everything, scrub it all really, really well. I did follow this advice one time, and actually I'm glad I did. I had no problem with rodents that way or anything like that, but I did when I got into Great Barrington and I was sharing a hotel room with Ratatouille and Crooked Letter, and I just scrubbed down everything, washed everything, really spent like all night going through my gear methodically and giving everything a cleaning, and I'd gotten some dish soap to do that, so I had really probably used like a half of a bottle of dish soap on all of my gear that night. And they were laughing at me. They're like, I don't know what got into you, Muse, but you do what you got to do there. That's kind of weird. The one thing that did actually help is that I had been developing a rash on basically my collarbone on, I think, both sides, one side more than the other. And I think it was cleaning the straps in my backpack and even just the rest that I took in Great Barrington there, that rash went away pretty quickly thereafter. The other thing that is notable about this car ride to Bangor is Haley's lack of participation in any of the conversation. And I get it. And you guys probably get it as well. It is a stark contrast to the previous day. So the previous day, that Friday, as soon as Haley made the decision, there was a lightness to her. And she was very happy and lighthearted for the rest of that day. I've got to imagine actually driving to the airport, though, she's probably processing through a lot of her stuff that she was still a little unsure. Is she making a big mistake at this point, leaving the trail? Is she going to regret it? I'm really happy to report that she doesn't regret it. I guess you heard it from her firsthand anyway. She doesn't regret it. This was what it needed to be for her, and that's wonderful. But I wonder if some of that was going through her mind because, yeah, she wasn't talking, and again, fair enough. So got to the airport, hugged Haley goodbye, sent her on her way, and then it was a matter of making our way back to the hostel by way of some neighboring town because I'm not even sure. I could just be completely wrong. Well, I'm saying I'm not sure, so how could I be wrong? But anyway, I don't even know if there was a food store in Monson or not. Either way, Chester needed to get some supplies for the party that night, so we stopped somewhere else, and I got something to eat or whatever. And I also got one of those very natural fruit drinks. I was trying to get a lot of very clean stuff in me to make up for the processed stuff that I'm going to be eating while I'm on trail. I kind of had that going on in my head. And to this day, I think that's what got me. I think I got a bad batch of that. I also got way too much of it, but it was a thick, natural drink that was blueberry based. But anyway, that happened and we got back to the hostel. I was still feeling fine for a little bit, but then not so much. You know where it went from there. And that ends up being more or less the rest of that day. Fast forward to the morning of the 22nd, as I mentioned in the entry, and I did feel great. I felt absolutely wonderful when I woke up, so no reason to stick around here anymore. We're back on trail. But as of the 21st, that was my last day at Shaw's. That's how that went. Back on trail next episode. Until then, this has been Muse, and you have been listening to Muse's AT Podcast. Thank you for walking with me, and happy trails.